Welcome to Piscataway African American Seniors Club Black History Celebration 2022. I'm Joyce Coles, President and your host. Each Friday in February, we will share information and aspects of health and wellness and its impact on the Black family. But before we begin, I want to say thank you to Mayor Waller and the Township Council for their support of the African American community. I also want to acknowledge and thank Amy Bauman, the Director on Aging, on the many programs that she and her staff create to motivate and keep seniors encouraged throughout this pandemic. Our theme this year, Black Health and Wellness. We'll share historical facts, music by the Singing Pastors of Piscataway, poetry by Ida Anderson, trivia by Diana Motley. We'll also take a peek at mental health issues and the role you play in taking charge of you and your family's health care. We'll also have a special appearance by our former president and Piscataway's very own Franklin Leroy Gibson, who celebrates his 100th birthday on February 22nd. You know, all across the nation, African American communities and houses of worship gather to celebrate Black History Month. Many programs are started with what was once called the Negro National Anthem, written by James Weldon Johnson and later put to music by his brother. Today it is known as the Black National Anthem. We are also starting our program with a recitation of the anthem by our very own founder, Ida Anderson. If you know the words, join in.
Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of faith that the dark path has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod. Fell in the days that hope, unborn, had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place on which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land.
I want to thank the outstanding members of the Piscataway African American Senior Club, including its terrific leader, Miss Joyce Coles. This group always puts on a fantastic set of shows. I am pleased that once again we can recognize Black History Month in Piscataway. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to focus my remarks on the importance of Black wealth. We all know that education often leads to higher paying jobs, but what creates true wealth is what a generation can pass down to another. We all love the American dream. Anyone can make it, right? For African Americans, the hurdles have been very high. Moreover, sadly, our country has a history of preference for some at the expense of Black families. From 200 years of bondage, no freed slave ever received 40 acres and a mule. In fact, some slave owners received $300 per slave from the government after emancipation. Moving into the 1930s, the New Deal was a turning point in America. From the depths of the Great Depression, the social safety net was born. Yet again, Black people would often be excluded. For example, union jobs are often a secured source of wealth, not just job security, but also medical care and pensions. Unions got the right to collective bargain in 1935 when the Wagner Act was passed Congress. That created the opportunity to build wealth for millions of workers. However, the Wagner Act also allowed unions to exclude non-whites. So when white families were rising into the middle class, many Black Americans were left out to scrape by. In fact, some craft unions would not integrate until the 1970s. Social Security would prevent poverty for millions of Americans in retirement. However, created in 1935, it did not include agricultural workers and domestic workers. For the many minority Americans barred from other jobs who could only find work in farming and cleaning, they would have no retirement help. Instead of providing for their children with an inheritance, their children would have to take care of them. What, though, is the biggest source of inherited wealth? Real estate. What children can inherit from their parents and family home is what builds prosperity. Yet, from the greatest giveaway of the government land, the Homestead Act, many African Americans would not benefit. Originally passed in 1862, a wide swath of the West would be given away just for an application, improving the land for a few years and filing an ownership deed. Almost 10% of the land of our country was just given away. Yet the Civil War would not end until 1865. So the initial claims of free land would be staked out by white families. Even after the Civil War, much of the areas of the South offered for homesteading was not farmable. Back out west, many homesteaders sold their land to corporations, creating a very handsome profit considering that they got the land for free. By the time the Homestead Act ended in 1934, more than 1.5 million white families, native-born and immigrant, profited from it. It was estimated that in 2000, about a quarter of the entire adult population of the United States were descendant from those who took advantage of the original Homestead Act. Would the New Deal in the 1930s help African Americans with housing? Sadly, no. With the creation of the Federal Housing Administration, millions of Americans would become first-time homebuyers. However, again, bigotry would leave out many Black families. The FHA had a national neighborhood appraisal system. Integrated neighborhoods were wrongly deemed too high of a risk for government-backed loans. This was called redlining. Between 1934 and 1962, $120 billion of federal-backed loans were issued. 98% of them went to white families. So again, I am glad that Piscataway is participating in Black History Month. It gives us an opportunity to bring up important topics. We become more educated and I think given a charge to build a better country that lets everyone become prosperous. Thank you.
My name is Amy Bauman, and I am the Director on Aging for Piscataway Township. It is my honor to introduce the Piscataway African American Association presentation for 2022. Even though we are not able to present in person, as we have in the past, the dynamic Piscataway African American Senior Club has taken the time to create an amazing presentation. This year's theme for Black History Month, Black Health and Wellness, takes a look at how American healthcare has often underserved the African American community. Health and wellness are completely vital for each and every individual to prevent diseases and mental health conditions. This was not always the case for African American individuals. Let's sit back and listen to this moving display of Piscataway African American Senior Club recollections of the past and what is being done in the future.
Hello, my name is Lois Green, and today I am filling in for Barbara George, who wanted to share some historical facts with you as it pertains to Black health and wellness. In order for us to live healthy lives, we must understand and become more responsible for our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Did you know that African American men are 30% more likely to have high blood pressure and less likely to keep their blood pressure under control than other ethnic groups? They are also 1.3 times more likely to have colon cancer. African American women are 60% more likely to have high blood pressure and twice as likely to have a stroke as the general population. They are also 40% more likely to be diagnosed with breast cancer. African American adults are 30% more likely to be obese and 60% more likely to be diagnosed with diabetes than other ethnic groups. And what about our children? African Americans have higher rates of childhood obesity than other ethnic groups. Many of these health issues are directly related to poor diet, little to no exercise, and high stress. So how did we get here? There are many contributing factors that have led to these disparities. Today we'll focus on 3 of them. The first contributing factor is the extremely limited or no access at all to medical care during slavery and post-slavery until recent times. Reasons for this includes the distrust of medical care because of Henrietta Lacks and Tuskegee experiments, as well as racial biases in medical treatment and assessment of care. For example, Serena Williams and Beyonce, despite their status and wealth, experienced dangerous medical negligence during pregnancy and childbirth that nearly cost them their lives. Another contributing factor is economics. In 2020, 19.5% of people of African descent in the United States were living below the poverty line compared to 8.2% of Caucasians and 8.1% of Asians. Similarly, socioeconomics impacts the quality and availability of fresh fruits and vegetables in communities of color. Many areas have limited access to affordable and nutritious food. This hinders individuals from achieving a healthy diet. The third factor we'll look at today is poor diet. Some influences of poor diet in the African American community date back to slavery. The leftover scraps of animals that enslaved people ate for survival, such as chitlins and hog maws are still part of the high salt, fried, and fatty food diet eaten by many today. The high mortality from diet-related diseases among African Americans strongly suggests a need to adopt diets lower in total fat, saturated fat, sugar, and salt. How do we create a change? Our diet, exercise, and stress play a major role in lessening health disparities in people of African descent. Suggestive foods often include colorful fruits and vegetables, leafy greens, yams, sweet potatoes, beans, nuts and peanuts, rice, especially whole grains, healthy oils, fish, eggs, poultry, and yogurt with a minimal amount of red meat, processed foods, and sweets. The American Heart Association says a healthy diet can lower your risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and stroke. Avoid or help treat diabetes, fight certain cancers and many chronic diseases, nurture healthy babies, and reduce depression. In addition to adequate nutrition, managing stress, a good night's sleep, staying hydrated, and exercise boosts your immune system. A word we hear more often today than ever before is stress. High stress left unchecked can contribute to many health problems, such as depression, high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity, and diabetes. Some helpful stress management tips are: practice relaxation techniques such as deep breathing, meditation, yoga, or Tai Chi. Spend quality time with your family and friends. Nurture a hobby, such as listening to music or reading. Get regular physical activity, such as dancing or exercise. According to the American Heart Association, for each hour of regular exercise you get, you'll gain about 2 hours of additional life expectancy. Exercise can lower your risk of high blood pressure, diabetes, and stroke. Reduce blood pressure in people who already have high blood pressure. Build stronger immunity. Help to reduce stress, depression, and anxiety. Control weight. Ensure you get better sleep. Walking is a free and simple exercise that you can do alone or with others. Find what works best for you, whether it's online exercise training through YouTube, community channels, or senior centers, individual or group classes for all ages and stages, stretches, tennis, Tai Chi, bike riding, yoga, and specifically to our seniors. Diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart conditions are not an inevitable part of aging. We are in charge of our health. We are what we eat. Thank you.
I am Eloise Robinson, member of Piscataway African American Seniors Club. I will talk briefly about the health risks that lower-income African Americans and people of color face from environmental hazards, environmental injustice, environmental racism. Environmental injustice happens when people are unequally impacted by environmental factors because of discrimination. Socioeconomic status plays a major part in which groups are affected by man-made environmental hazards. Dr. Benjamin Chavis, former director of the United Church of Christ, Commission for Racial Justice initially coined the term environmental racism in 1982. Environmental racism is a concept within the movement of environmental injustice, which developed in the United States in the late 1960s. African American communities and members of low socioeconomic backgrounds began pushing back against a disproportionate level of exposure to hazardous waste, air pollutants, and chemicals. Half a century later, the issue is still with us across the country. Impoverished urban neighborhoods of color have historically been located in areas with lower property values, where factories and other industrial establishments are constructed cheaply. Since the 1930s, streets where people of color lived have been deemed hazardous, which designates them as locations for toxic facilities. As a result, redlining has historically denied residents of these communities access to basic public and private services, and increased exposure to minute particles of matter is linked to various health risks. Additionally, urban heat islands, which arise from insufficient green space and an abundance of concrete projects and asphalt, trap more of the sun's energy. Temperatures on a scorching summer day can vary as much as 20 degrees across different parts of the same city. Poor and minority neighborhoods often bear the brunt of that heat, putting them at high risk for heat mortality due to lack of air conditioning as well as tree cover. Large agricultural farms and facilities are disproportionately located near communities of low income and people of color. Waste lagoons that produce hydrogen sulfide, that smelly gas that smells like rotten eggs, cause viral and bacterial contamination of drinking water. There is a high exposure to pesticides, poorly managed toxic waste dumping, toxic fumes, chemical runoff, and pollutant matter in the air from factories disposing of toxic animal waste. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, better known as the EPA, and the EPA National Center for Environmental Assessment, minority populations are exposed to greater environmental health risks than white. An estimated 70% of contaminated waste sites are located in low-income neighborhoods and communities, and upwards of 2 million Americans live within a mile of sites that are vulnerable to flooding, the majority in Black and brown communities. Some of the environmental health hazards include toxic waste facilities, garbage and toxic waste dumps, chemical toxins in landfills and rivers, pesticides in agriculture, foul odors including toxic fumes and hydrogen sulfide, contaminated drinking water, toxic animal waste, air pollution from odor fumes, smog, soot, oil, smoke, ash, and construction dust, lead poisoning, and other sources of pollutants that lower the quality of life and lead to diseases and cancers. Now I will quickly mention just a few of the blatant examples of environmental racism from across the country. Warren County, North Carolina, is one of the first cases of environmental injustice in the United States. A PCB, polychlorinated biphenyls, landfill located in the Black community of Afton was created in 1982 by the state of North Carolina as a place to dump contaminated soil. 60,000 tons of soil containing PCB was buried. Decades later, 2004, after years of legal actions, North Carolina was required to spend over $25 million to clean up and detoxify the PCB landfill. Cancer Alley, an 85-mile stretch of land along the Mississippi River, between New Orleans and Baton Rouge is lined with oil refineries and petrochemical plants. Residents, predominantly black, are 50 times more likely to develop cancer than the average American. Pahokee, Florida. Poor, predominantly African American rural towns along the Glades in Pahokee face a harrowing experience every October, the arrival of black snow. Black snow is high levels of soot that pollutes the area due to sugar burning. Sugarcane farmers legally set their fields on fire prior to harvest in order to burn down everything but the cane, resulting in major amounts of pollution. Residents experience a greater amount of respiratory disease and an increase in asthma. In 2010, the Tennessee Valley Authority transported 4 million cubic yards of coal ash to Uniontown, Alabama, a predominantly low-income black community. The EPA deemed the coal ash non-hazardous in Uniontown. The community was provided with no protection against the highly dangerous ash. Closer to home, Bronx, New York. Air pollution rates are so bad, an estimated 20% of children have asthma. The South Bronx, a majority low-income minority community, has been nicknamed Asthma Alley. We are all aware of Flint, Michigan's failure to properly treat the municipal water system after changing water sources, resulting in the mass lead poisoning of hundreds of children and adults from April 2014 to December 2015. Despite complaints and reports of high levels of sickness from rural residents, the majority who are low income and people of color, city management failed to respond and treated the matter with indifference. Today, the problem has not been resolved. Those who cannot afford an alternative are stuck in the area and continue to be exposed to health hazards. The towns of Harrisburg and Manchester, neighborhood of Houston, Texas, 98% of the residents are Hispanic and is home to concentrated regions of oil refineries, chemical plants, sewage treatment facilities, and hazardous waste sites. High levels of concentrated lead are found in children. And right in our backyard, South Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Energy Solutions refinery, the largest and oldest on the East Coast, had for decades been killing its predominantly black neighbors in South Philadelphia. It's responsible for more than half of the city's cancer-causing air toxins. In Philadelphia each year, which has some of the highest asthma hospital rates in the city, the refinery closed June 2019 due to a fire. However, it continues to emit benzene, one of the most dangerous chemicals to breathe in. It's known to cause both leukemia and lymphoma, especially in children. To summarize, lower income communities of African Americans and people of color suffer from overwhelming environmental burdens that cause chronic health risks for many members of their community, including asthma, cancer, heart disease, lung disease, pregnancy complications including low birth rate, stillbirth, or premature birth, higher levels of miscarriages, birth defects, impairment of brain development, premature death, heat mortality, and COVID-19 mortality. African Americans died at twice the rate of their white counterparts. What should be done? According to Dr. Robert Bullard, known as the father of environmental justice, to eliminate the health risk, communities susceptible to environmental harms should have the power to advocate for themselves and their communities. More funds should be invested in organizations run by BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who work to alleviate environmental injustices in their neighborhood. As per the EPA, we must take action toward achieving environmental justice, meaning the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Thank you.
Hello, this is Diana Motley again, and I have another trivia question for you. True or false? Chest pain is always the first sign of a heart attack. Okay, let's stop and think about that for a moment. Actually, that turns out to be false. There are many symptoms of a heart attack: chest discomfort, lightheadedness, nausea or vomiting, jaw, neck, or back pain, discomfort or pain in the arm or shoulders, shortness of breath. Women are more likely than men to experience shortness of breath, nausea and vomiting, back or jaw pain. So just be aware of these symptoms. And while we're on that topic, I'd like to go over signs of a stroke. It used to be called FAST, for face, arms, speech, and time. Now it's called BFAST. B is for balance. Are you having issues as dizziness, unsteadiness, or poor coordination? E is for eyesight. Do you suddenly have double vision, vision loss, or other visual problems? F is for face. Does your face droop or seem uneven when you smile? A is for arms. Are one or both of your arm or legs suddenly numb, paralyzed, or weak? S is for speech. Are you slurring words, not comprehending, or having other difficulty communicating? If you have any of these symptoms, T is for time. It's time to call 911. Don't take your own vehicle to the hospital. Ambulances can call ahead and make sure the stroke team is prepared to meet you right away. So remember, it's BFAST: balance, eyesight, face, arm, speech. Any of those symptoms is T for time. Time to call 911 and get to the hospital as soon as possible. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for tuning into our program today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.